Now, for me, ownership is not being cancelled because of my subject material, and it's me owning the interaction with the people who have said they want to consume that content, and we've made a conscious decision to do that together. And typically that happens through blockchain.
Welcome to Object, Subject, Form, a series of conversations exploring the human side of creativity at the evolving intersection of art, technology, and finance. The following conversation is with Benjamin White, VP of Content Creator Strategy at Rug Radio, the first decentralized media ecosystem serving as an incubator, accelerator, and brand builder for independent creators. Ben is an e-commerce entrepreneur, foodie, writer, podcaster, and self-proclaimed frustrated artist, helping brands and businesses leverage the power of Web3 technologies and platforms. Today we explore the creator economy and how Web3 solutions are reshaping the landscape of digital art and media by opening up new possibilities and opportunities for creatives and brands to form deeper connections with their audiences. So Ben, we've discussed from time to time the challenges that creatives often face in the current content landscape, and in particular Web3, which is your focus. So from your perspective, what do you think it takes for a creator to, as I've read that you've put it, be capable of mainstream transcendence?
That sounds so like airy-fairy, doesn't it? Like mainstream transcendence. Yeah. I think what I was getting at there was that it's really easy to operate in a niche or a niche, as some people may call it. But it's really easy to do that and then to forget that actually what you're often trying to do is educate and inform people who don't necessarily know as much as you do as a creator, an entertainer, an educator. And so, yeah, I had you saw it on X a few months back. I had a little Jerry Maguire moment where I kind of I launched into my frustration, even as someone now who represents talent in the space with Rug Radio and Decrypt, in the sense that it just felt like there were quite a lot of lazy creators in the niche that we were operating in, which is Web3. And that isn't, I'm not digging them all out and saying you're lazy people. They're not lazy by any means. But what they are not doing is challenging they're not pushing the boundaries. And so my viewpoint at that moment was, I think there are a lot of people here who are creating content that in any other walk of life, in any other creative field, if you took that content to a producer or a media, like a platform or another audience, they'd laugh you out of the room. And there was, and so what I'm really eager to do is take really, really incredible stories and narratives and individuals who are able to tell those stories and challenge them to do so in a way that does more than just talk to the people that already follow them. And in fact, what it does is it really starts to onboard people. Like Web3, for people that don't know, and I'm not going to assume everyone does, is essentially the next iteration of the internet. Web 1, the internet as it was when it was formed, it was a place where it was a repository, right? It was a place where information could be held. And then Web 2.0, I remember that phrase being used all too well in the kind of like late noughties, early 10s, 2010s. And that was Web 2.0 was this idea that you could now interact with and follow the creators of the content, and there was a discourse backwards and forwards, and that essentially is what we knew as social media. So the advent of Facebook and Twitter as it was, and Instagram and all these other platforms, and so Web3 now is not only being able to interact back and forth, but it's actually like ownership. It's ownership of your data. It's ownership of your content. It's ownership of the conversations you are having.
And how does one own?
Yeah, it's a really interesting. Like, we can talk. This is a deep one, but to own is really like to belong to decentralized platforms. Like the big issue with ownership, and I'll use an analogy, and I will come back and answer your question in a moment, but I'll use an analogy which is like photographers in the noughties, or artists, but photographers in particular. There was the invent of this thing called Instagram, as we know it now. And Instagram was offering people exposure in exchange for giving their photography away. That's how a lot of photographers suddenly felt. What the heck? Like, you want me to put my photographs on here for free?
Yeah.
And it took a while for people to get to understand that, yeah, and in doing so, you get to build a community, a group of people around your photography who you can then potentially reach out to as customers. The problem, in the first instance, is that the moment you post on that platform, the content belongs to it's Meta, isn't it, that owns Instagram? And you might be a life photographer, and your muse might be nudes, as an example.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of wonderful nude art photography. And I saw the smile, Simon. But no, but truly, like, very, very incredible artistic performance art. And my journey into Web3 came through art as a medium. And yet, the people at Meta and Instagram made a decision very early on that nudity was not going to be allowed for seemingly appropriate reasons. Like, I'm not saying that, but that was a catch-all. And you've got how many hundreds of millions, potentially billions of accounts on Instagram, and they all had to adhere by that rule. Now, for me, ownership is not being cancelled because of my subject material, and it's me owning the interaction with the people who have said they want to consume that content, and we've made a conscious decision to do that together. And typically that happens through blockchain. And I am not the best person to explain blockchain explicitly, despite working in the field, but essentially, like, everyone owning a wallet, and that's typically filled with a cryptocurrency, and being able to use that currency to purchase a token, and that token giving access to a token gated place, and essentially then what happens is you own the content, you set up these tokens, and the people are able to purchase them, and by purchasing them, they then have access to you and your content and a discourse with you. And that is Web3. Now, going back to the question you asked, which was, how are people capable of mainstream transcendence? Like, being able to explain that is tough. And actually, what a lot of content creators are doing who work and operate in the Web3 space is they're talking about their excitement for Web3 to people who are already there. And for me, like, mainstream transcendence means actually being able to create compelling content, compelling potentially arguments or debates, or just like inspirational content that turns heads and encourages other people to look at Web3 and say, this is something that I'm interested in participating in early, because it's still in very, very early stages. And also, I'm really interested in potentially building and becoming a developer in that space. And I think, yeah, that was really where that came from. So that's what I meant by capable of mainstream transcendence. And then in terms of what it takes, wow, there's another rabbit hole we can go down.
It's a huge layer, yeah.
For me, it's this idea of value, adding value. And there are many, many people in the world that come into a space or a scene or whatever we want to call it, a sector, and they extract. And a lot of that has come through like brand interaction with communities, as we in Web3 call them, whereas you would previously have called them consumers.
Yes.
And I think there is this large shift that is happening, and that creators capable of mainstream transcendence right now need to understand that relationship between brands and communities and how it's evolving. And what I'm trying to say there is the relationship between Nike and a consumer for the past 50 years has been that Nike makes incredible sneakers and sports wear and sports apparatus, and people see those things through campaigns and etc., and they are consumers. They are people who are encouraged to then go and purchase those things. And the relationship is one of provider and consumer.
Right, it's transactional.
Completely transactional. I think the way that the relationship between brand and community member, as I'm going to start referring to it for this, is actually one of a two-way like discourse. It's one where the participant, the member of the community, is actually able to buy into a lifestyle and buy into a collective, a group of people who also are fans of that and want to participate together and want to have a deeper understanding of how Nike creates the sneakers, who the art worker was, which sports person they were being created for. I want to be privy to that conversation because that's incredible content. I want to understand where the materials are sourced from. I want to understand how are they ethically sourced? Are they sourced based on performance? Like all of these things, all of this discourse for me is what is starting to form the change in the relationship between participants and brands. And I think a really great creator in this space needs to understand that relationship and do a better job of explaining and providing a pathway for people to understand how that's moving. I gave Nike as an example there because of their dot swoosh campaign that they've been running, which really interestingly started off as a moment for people to claim a dot swoosh name. I grabbed 1984 dot swoosh because it's the year I was born, and it's like an iconic, like Orwell's book 1984. It felt great to be the person that owned 1984 dot swoosh as like an account name, and then I was able to go and I was able to claim my digital sneakers and the artwork that came with those. But very quickly, Simon, what happened is, is I got pitched 4 or 5 things back to back to purchase, and it stung a bit. It stung a bit because I purchased the digital collectibles because I felt like what was happening is I was being given a portal into better understanding what Nike as a creative force represented, and that I was going to be given insight and education in terms of that. And actually what happened very, very quickly is I became a consumer, and it turned me off. And so I wanted to give you that as an example because they came out of the block really well. Yeah. And I think they've fallen off the path a little bit, and I'll be really interested to see how they pick that up in the coming months, because they will get it, because the rhetoric that what they were talking about initially was fantastic, and they were really able to capture the essence of what it meant to invite people, behind the velvet rope, like come on into the factory, come into the boardroom or the creative studio, come and see how we put this together. And that's exciting. Like as a consumer, I even called myself a consumer, as a participant, that's why I wear Nikes. It's because they have a real an exciting creative ability where I open up my sneakers app and immediately I'm like, oh my God, I love those, and I want to understand the story behind it, and I love the short video they've created. But it goes beyond that now, and it's like, what were the decisions that led to making those things exist or happen?
Yeah. It's that extra layer of access.
Completely.
So that's a brand. What about individual content creators? You speak about the conversation going deeper. So if somebody is creating content, if we liken it to Nike fans who have an opportunity to go a bit more behind the curtain, understanding and learning more about the process, for content creators specifically, those who may not have a product, what kind of advice do you give there, or how is Web3 going to aid content creators and differentiate itself from traditional media approaches we're familiar with now?
It's a great one, and I think it comes back to this process of ownership that I spoke about, and what I mean there is, if they don't have a product, they become the product. And I am working with many creators who are living a life and understanding a movement to such an extent that people want to follow along and understand how that came to be. And I would liken it to the late noughties invent of Vine, if you remember.
Yes,
And then the influencers, as we now call them, that were born of that, the likes of Logan Paul and KSI, and let's pick on those two because many people know who they are, and they're pretty prevalent now and prolific in pop culture. These are two guys that started making 10-second videos that were funny, and then Vine got closed. It got pulled down, and it was a very, very funny platform. It was brilliant. Like, I loved Vine. I still go back to YouTube to watch old Vines because it just made me laugh. And
like kind of instant gratification, like snackable content.
And then these guys had to pivot, and so they moved to YouTube, and they moved to Instagram, and they moved to X, and they moved everywhere else, and the clever ones were able to spread themselves across quite a few platforms, because you always had this moment where you could have been deplatformed, where you could have where the terms and conditions could have changed, or where that you were deemed to have broken a rule and therefore your account was closed, or whatever it might be. And this idea of either being cancelled, this cancel culture thing that existed, I'm sure we'll come back to that in a moment, or the idea of just having your account closed on the whim of somebody. For me, that has always been an exciting opportunity for Web3. But I can also speak about an incredible musician called Violetta. Violetta Zeroni. She's an amazing musician, singer, songwriter. She plays instruments. She's Italian, I think, originally. Lives in the States now. And she went all in. She was doing quite well on Spotify, but she had a record deal, which she's one of many, many, many artists who, if you're not in that top 0.0005%, like you're nowhere.
Specifically in music,
right? Even though she has an abundance of talent, and she's a wonderful artist. And so she's gone all in on Web3 as a creator. But she doesn't just sing and play music. She is now a regular Spaces host on X. So she has like a community of people who love her music, but now on a regular basis, she hosts open to public discussions and conversations about what it means to be an artist, or inviting other artists to come up and sing, or inviting other people to give their opinion on music and what's going on. And she kind of like flits between Web3 a bit and music. She walks a really delicate balance, and she's very good at it. She also has a Discord community, and in order to be able to join the Discord community, you have to hold one of her tokens.
Yes.
So she has some great NFTs that she worked with a wonderful artist to create. And I think they're even musical NFTs as well, so that the metadata within them includes music, for some of her music from a catalogue of music.
And just to be clear for 1 second, you don't have to have a token to join somebody's Discord in general.
No.
But with Web3 mechanics, you can set it up in a way so that it's token gated.
Yeah. So imagine there are multiple channels in a server. You join a server, there are public channels and there are token gated channels. And by holding one of her NFTs, you get to go and like verify that you are the owner by connecting your wallet. Correct. So it can only be you that is the custodian of that token. And it gives you access into another channel within her server where she may provide different content, more behind the scenes kind of stuff, or, you know, special gigs where she'll play to the first 10 people that come into a room. And so this idea of like being able to belong to her community and have access and such a great discourse with her, for me, that's the opportunity that Web3 provides content creators. You don't have to be Logan Paul with 6 million followers or however many he's got, and a sports drink brand and a WWE contract, and you know, like the guy's and fair play to him. Like I'm not a fan of Logan Paul, but I tip my hat to the guy in terms of like his marketing masterclass that he's shown us all in the last decade. Incredible. But you know, there is only enough room in the world for a certain amount of creators of that level. What you really need, and I think there's a book on it somewhere, is like, you know, I think, in fact, I don't know what the right number is that people use, whether it's 1,000, but like true fans. Like
that's what I've heard. If you have 1,000 true fans.
If you have 1,000 true fans who are absolutely into what you do,
like interacting with you daily,
you can get on a level where you engage with those people on a daily basis, where you know them by name. Sometimes you might know them by face. You may have met them and had drinks if you've held like an in real life event, which they could only get tickets to by going into your token gated part of your Discord or whatever like that. You can offer special rates for them. They can get first access to some of your records or some of your books or whatever it is that you're creating. They can receive rewards, like for being there over a period of time. You might create something that's just for them as holders of your as members of your community. For me, this is what Web3 brings, and there's been a lot of talk, sadly, of Web3 being like the Wild West. Of it being this space,
which it is, which it has been, very much.
It absolutely is,
yeah.
But these are very different parts. You know, that is an element of the space where people are speculating on the value of things in order to try and shortcut generational wealth.
Yeah.
Which happens. She's not trying to do that. What she's done is she's created a community of 1,000, maybe sometimes a few less, maybe sometimes a few more, depending on how the market fluctuates. True fans who are willing to support her and her work and have given her the opportunity to generate revenue without ripping people off by adding value, not extracting. And she's been able to buy her house. She's been able to buy her car. She's been able to buy her instruments. She's been able to travel the world and see people and do things. She's been able to do that by plying her craft, by being a great singer, songwriter, and content creator. And for me, that is what Web3 gives the opportunity for content creators to do. En masse.
It's weaving both together, yes. Understanding a bit more about people's process as well. I mean, you can imagine early talent who could be starting out, or somebody who's a superstar, and you kind of want to know how they got there. And the problem is, I would say, probably nowadays, is people only see the success.
Yes.
And only see the result of all the work that led to this success. And it feels like now you're able to follow people who might be along any part of their journey and understand a bit more about the artist or the creator and their story or process.
Completely agree. Yeah. And to go back then to the first question you gave me, which is like, what does it take for a creator to transcend? for me at the moment, I think there is a certain element of being very, very transparent, being particularly humble, and being prepared to speak on a level with the people who support you in lifetime.
And make mistakes, right? Because if
yes.
you're doing all this in public, you're making mistakes in public. So there has to be a certain level of forgiveness of the people who are, quote unquote, buying into you as a brand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think people will forgive mistakes if you own them.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Yeah.
But if you own them, if you try things out and they don't work out the way you thought they might, I think people will be forgiving of that. And I think people will enjoy coming along for the ride and learning as you do those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I think that is that's something that really excites me. And so when I talk about my frustration is always been with creators who talk to the same people about the same things, but talk about this technology which allows you to do so much more. And I've got a real admiration for people who have skin in the game and who don't just talk about the tech and talk about the next evolution of the internet, but they're actually there and they're working in it and they're trying it and they're applying it and they're learning from the mistake, testing it exactly.
Yeah. So I'm a creator listening to this episode and I have no idea what Web3 is, but now I'm interested. Mm-hmm. Where do I start?
Great question. I wish there was a definitive answer. Look, I think as much as it can be a bit of a cesspool, Twitter, as it was called, X, is a great place to start.
I mean, that is actually where I started my journey and getting more info.
And that's because there is a community within X that not a lot of people outside of it or know of. Suddenly, when you follow a few people in there and you start talking about it, you become aware of this whole space, and people refer to it as CT or crypto Twitter. Yeah. And that's because a lot of it is related to cryptocurrencies, which obviously are born of blockchains, and blockchain is where Web3 really differentiates itself from Web 2 and 1. I think there are some great resources out there. Obviously, I work with Rug Radio, which hosts like a daily show on X Spaces. I think it's at 10 a.m. Eastern time, which is at the moment 3 p.m. in the UK where I'm based. And it's called FOMO Hour. And it's a great opportunity where there are like 3 people who I trust. Yes. One of them I work for, but 3 people who I trust who are actively participating and building and have skin in the game, and are experts, where you can start to learn from them what's going on. And what I would say for people who are interested in Web3 is don't go in with the intention to participate a great deal for a couple of weeks.
Observe. Be an observer. Listen. Write down or click. Sensibly click links without having wallet connected, etc. But and that's a whole other episode.
We can go into wallet security and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that you need to understand, and I ventured into the space 2021, so I'm still relatively new when you consider like crypto. Bitcoin specifically has been running since 2009.
Yeah.
But so I would go. There's also Rug Radio has recently merged with another great business that's been born out of Web3 called Decrypt, which is a media.
Sorry, for those who don't know, what is Rug Radio?
Rug Radio. So, Rug Radio for a long time has been an idea. It is an active business and it is running, but essentially it's this notion of creating a platform where, just like I spoke about a moment ago, creators can be responsible for creating their content and have a decentralized discourse with their community, And Rug Radio is a platform, and it aims to be a platform where those things can happen. Now, for a long time, it has been a number of like creative outlets which have all used centralized social media platforms: X, YouTube, Spotify, the usual bunch, Instagram. Over time, what it's doing actually is it's creating a tech stack that uses blockchain technology to enable creators to host content where they would natively host it, so using those platforms.
Yeah, but like a YouTube or another
like a YouTube, like
platform.
an X or whatever, all of those things.
Okay.
But has a central platform that's connected via APIs, etc. I'm not a developer, so please don't ask me to go any deeper than that, Simon. But essentially where they can start to build and house a community and reward the participants, the people who participate with their content, and be rewarded in turn. Like if you have advertisers, as an example, who want to come in and pay to advertise within that content, like within that ecosystem of content, you can drop essentially the bounty in the middle, and you can have content creators create content to earn their share of it, and you can have actual participants view and engage and share in that content to also take their part of that bounty. And
Got it.
That's a very, very loose explanation that I've given you there, but essentially Rug Radio and Decrypt, which is the company I was about to tell you about a moment ago, under a parent company which is being formed right now called Dastan, are building the tech stack that enables that value exchange between brand, advertiser, participant, content creator in a way that sees everyone rewarded for their contribution to the platform, as opposed to a creator putting images on Instagram and a participant viewing those images and nobody being rewarded but the platform, with the exception of DMs where you might get someone who reaches out to you and you can do something commercial, but don't bank on that being like having visibility of your stuff because the algorithm might change or whatever. Yeah. So this is what Rug Radio is working to create under this brand Dastan.
And you mentioned inserting a message or something into the middle of a piece of content, for example. So how does this differentiate from, let's say, I put up a video on YouTube and it gets somewhat successful, and then there's an ad running in front of it, and I get a tiny percentage of whatever that ad revenue might be, depending on how successful my content is or how many clicks or views it gets. So how do the mechanics of what Rug Radio is doing differ from that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't have all of the answers in terms of the technology behind that. But one of the really important bits to that there is when you spoke about a tiny percentage, and in this instance, like a differentiator is that as the creator of content, what we all agree to be reasonable is that actually the creator takes the lion's share of the bounty. But also, I think the biggest difference actually is in the share being open to the participant. So as a consumer of content, by going and engaging with the content and potentially commenting on it and sharing it, and then engaging with the creator, following the creator, that participant can actually share in the spoils of the reward. And then the content creator then has this discourse, this relationship with the participant, which again is owned. Like they own it, as opposed to it being algorithm fed and owned by a platform that creates rules around
what gets seen, what's successful.
Exactly that.
So it's like going back to the original question again, creating content that can cross over and extend beyond Web3 in general, that people would be interested in on a wider scale.
Yeah.
And you're having a direct conversation with the people who are interacting with your content.
Correct.
Versus it just be a like or a comment or whatever. And you don't even know who that person is.
Completely.
So leading to a more direct line of communication there.
Yeah, and there's another difference as well, which is the being able to bolt on additional consumer applications that change the way you interact with that content. I'll give you a perfect example right now, which is something that Rogue Radio and Dustan with Decrypt are working on, which is prediction markets. And if you're familiar with something that's having a real run of success right now, it's a platform called Polymarket.
Yes.
Polymarket is a prediction market where essentially people who are paying attention to popular culture and things that are going on can go to Polymarket, and there will be a liquidity pool that is based on the outcome of something that's happening in popular culture. Presidential election race as a prime example. It's the number one prediction market at the moment. And what you do essentially is you have an amount of a token, and you're able to stake how much of that you bet on the outcome of something. And then anyone who comes behind you and stakes the same way as you do, the value of that liquidity pool goes up, and you can either hang on until the end and take your share of the spoils because you predicted correct, or actually you can withdraw your stake, which has gone up in value because more people have done it. Now imagine, and this is where Rug Radio and Decrypt as a merger and Dustan, the parent company, are super excited.
Yeah.
Imagine now the ability to have a prediction market that is linked directly to the distribution of media as it happens. So if you're hosting a show or launching a podcast or creating a Twitter, formerly known as X, thread about the outcome of the presidential election, about the outcome of the Formula One race, which is about to happen this weekend, or the Premier League, the English Premier League result, like the win champion in next May.
Yes.
Like if you're able to draw people to a particular liquidity pool that you're tagging, at the moment the conclusion to that event happens, as a creator that was sending people there to effectively bet on the outcome, you then earn a percentage of what of the final liquidity pool. So these are and I guess is that a new and a different thing? Well, you could previously have had like a referral code where you could have sent someone to someone else's betting platform to be able to do it. But the difference here is this ability to kind of like have this discourse and have ownership of who your community members are, and they're being rewarded and you're being rewarded for creating and participating with the content and taking people to the prediction market, as we spoke about, as a consumer application. And now there are many other consumer applications that could follow on behind that. Yeah. Your ability to drive traffic in a particular way based on who your community are and be rewarded and have them rewarded accordingly is really what this decentralization thing is all about.
And it opens up so many possibilities as to what you could actually predict.
Yeah.
I remember we discussed before, I remember you gave me an example. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it just opened my mind to what people could actually bet on, even within a podcast conversation.
Well, yeah, like I'll give you some other examples. You could have content which is live speed dating.
Yeah. And
you could have like based on the outcome of people getting one another's exchanging phone numbers or not. Or you could go with you could stream live poker. And you could bet on the outcome. You could bet on whether a particular player was going to get over or below a particular threshold of chip holdings, or they were going to be the ultimate winner of the tournament and the game. Like, it really does. It opens up a lot. It doesn't just have to be like, will this person win? Yes or no. Like a prediction market can be based on so many different things, and absolutely, providing you can bring enough people together to create a liquidity pool that can pay for everything. And I understand that like there's a minimum amount of like people that you need to have involved in the idea behind a liquidity pool, and the amount of
for it to
credit
be
that
successful.
goes into.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, when this takes off, you could see it becoming, certainly for mainstream events and for the news. You know, like the other day, I saw the director of the Secret Service was being poured over the car.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, who was having, you know, for the whole like Trump assassination attempt.
That would have been a great one to see. Oh, would she actually answer a question?
Will they resign? Well, yeah.
Will she answer a question properly?
Will they answer a question? Yes or no? Will they still be in post in 48 hours? Yes or no?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Will they resign or will they be sacked? Like there are so many things that you can do for it, and it's a fascinating thing. But the idea that as a creator you can take your, you know, like Violetta's got an amazing opportunity. The gal I was speaking about a moment ago, who's going to win the Mercury Prize for music next year, who's going to be number one on the US charts this week, who's going to be number one on the country charts this week. Like there are so many like prediction markets you can jump into if you've got a community of people who are following what you're saying and are into and are engaged with you. You can draw them in so many different directions to get involved with these things, and they're all managed via blockchain, which essentially makes them trustless. It means you don't have to worry about someone like taking your money and doing a runner and all of that kind of stuff. Like if it's built on a proper platform, then that is decentralized, then you have the ability to do these things and know that everyone is coming in from a place of like equal standing.
Yeah, I think what I'm really loving about all of this is it's adding this additional layer, not just engagement, but a financial layer for creatives that never really existed before, right? And it's that intersection. You know, the whole premise of this podcast is to have these conversations that intersect art, technology, and finance.
Love that.
Coming together in a way that benefits creators in general and providing opportunities to those who didn't have this avenue of earning before.
Yeah.
And what I also love about how you've been explaining things is you don't have to have a deep understanding of the technology.
No, you don't.
At least I hope you won't
don't.
when this actually starts really evolving, because I think during the early days of crypto and Web3, you know, we've been on the road and on the journey of understanding, you know, reading white papers and understanding a lot more about the underlying technology and really getting into the weeds, which is fine. And it's great knowledge to have, to go down all of these rabbit holes, for all of it. But on the flip side, it's getting to a point where you probably don't have to. And I think a lot of people may not want to, and, you know, just reap the benefit of what has been built.
I think as with any emerging, exciting narrative, technology, whatever, these things are improved and smoothed out, and the UI UX is made so infinitely better based on more people participating and more people understanding. And this goes all the way back to your first question and my answer, which is the people who get in early that expect great things from anything are responsible for making it happen. And you cannot rest on your laurels at that moment. That's the moment where you have to push, you have to create value, you have to take the time, like I'm trying to right now, poorly, to explain this to people who are not familiar with it in a way that not just familiarizes them, but actually makes them excited to go and have a look themselves. And you know, I listened to Loxley, who is the CEO of Dastan, my boss.
Yep.
He's a great
guy. Little quick shout to Lox and Farouk.
Loxley and Farouk. Now, Farouk, he's the guy that hosts the FOMO Hour show, which I spoke to a while back. Loxley's a CEO who is really helping to turn the dream of Rogue Radio into a reality. And to listen to him talk about what the potential is of the predictions market. It makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and that's not just because it's this great opportunity for everyone to go in and and make loads of money. Like that's not what it is. Actually, it's about like creating a really, really disruptive piece of tech where creators get to bring their audiences who, no matter if they've got $10 million to spend or $100 to spend on a prediction market, platform, they are going to get equal reward for the amount that they're able to put in. They're able to have the same level of discourse with the people who are creating the content. They're able to be rewarded for their participation. But more importantly, Dastan is creating a business model where it only needs to take a fraction from every transaction to create a really great business model to be able to continue operating and creating more, to exist and create more consumer applications. So this isn't like, the likes of Meta, who are, and I don't want to pick on Zuckerberg, but it isn't like the likes of Meta who are saying, yes, give me all of your images and go and spend and doom scroll for eternity, and who knows what the algorithm is. And by the way, all the advertising revenue that we make, we're keeping. Like, this is such a different model to that. It's about rewarding participation, and it's a very, very disruptive model. And I'm hugely excited, not just in my little part of it here, which is that Rug Radio Dastan piece, but this is going on all over Web3. There are pockets of this kind of case study everywhere, which is creating decentralized applications that change people's lives, that disrupt markets, and that are bringing communities together to come and try these things out. And it's really, really exciting. Yeah.
And just to discuss the Rug Radio and Decrypt merger quickly, we don't have to go deep into it, but what were the benefits of the two platforms coming together?
Yeah, it came at a point where they both were brilliant at what they did, but they both absolutely needed one another. Rug Radio and Farouk, who is the president now of Dastan, and he's the founder of Rug Radio, and he's a social media influencer personality. He's an entrepreneur. He's very, very, very nice, sweet, very, very funny, great guy, actually.
Epitome of consistency. Farouk's just been there.
The guy shows up and bangs the door down every day
with the same level of energy.
It's actually, it's unbelievable. He's relentless. But going back to, remind me of the question again, Simon.
It was the benefits of the merger between Rug
Right, the
and
benefits
Decrypt.
of the merger were that Farouk had been able to create an amazing voice within Web3 that understood the community. It was like it understood the memes, like Elon has said, whoever owns the memes owns the narrative, right?
Yeah.
And this is true, and so it owned the memetics, it owned the conversation, owned the ability to document on and give the views of the news, right?
Yes.
Decrypt was the opposite. Decrypt has got, such journalistic integrity and such great editorial, fantastic writing, and really deep networked connections within the space to be able to pull genuinely insightful journalism and news about how the space is developing and what's going on. And together they're going to become, and they've already started to become, a real force, because Decrypt then brings the news and Rug Radio brings the views on the news via creators in a network. And so now what you have is both of these forces being able to come together to create a much bigger machine when it comes to distribution of media and news and opinion based on, we're currently working in Web3, but they can go so much broader and wider than that. And so that's why that merger was born and became became is a very, very exciting thing, and is also super important for both businesses independently.
And in the middle of all of this, Content Plus.
Right. I have to tell you, Content Plus is actually going to change name.
Oh.
And I can't give you the name yet.
Oh, come on.
I can't. But Content Plus was something that was announced a few months back, and it's been pinned. It's been the pinned tweet on a few profiles for a little while.
Yep.
Essentially, Content Plus is the tech stack that I was speaking about a moment, that will essentially reward people for going and consuming media where they consume it and share it in a particular way via a decentralized platform. Sorry. So Content Plus is not an application. It's a browser extension which is married up with a dashboard, which essentially allows you to go and consume particular content and fulfill particular quests around, and challenges and missions and whatever you want to call them, around like following the right people, consuming the right content, commenting, sharing, becoming part of the broader community, checking out what's going on, being better informed, completing like micro tests and quizzes, so actually being informed about the content that you're consuming and being rewarded in turn for doing that. It's the tech that's being built around that. And there'll be a token which powers Content Plus and the broader Dastan ecosystem.
So like the quests and the quizzes, it's a way to ensure you did engage with the content.
Exactly, right? So it's one thing to say to someone, hey, for us to be able to reward you with this airdrops are things that happen in Web3 quite a lot, because there are lots of protocols that are being set up and they need to create a token that powers their engine, and they need to distribute that accordingly. So what they do is they airdrop it to people who participate early. And you find that there are people who farm those airdrops. And by farming, what I mean is they just go and they click on the right buttons, and they go and they turn up every day, and they pull the right levers. And then when it comes to it at the end, maybe they stake some of their existing token in here, and they spend some money on that. And they do all of these things that they're asked to do. But at no point really does it feel like they have to engage. And that's the difference with Content Plus, as it was called, and it will be called something else going forward, is that engagement is absolutely mandatory. This isn't about just turning up and clicking on a button, taking you through to an article or a podcast, and then closing that and getting rewarded.
And there's ways to cheat that, isn't there? So you
have to participate. You have to understand what you've been asked, and then there'll be quizzes and there'll be educational modules that you have to sit and go through in order to validate that you did indeed ingest the content and engage with it but what we're not trying to do is create like a farm of people that are relentlessly doing that. What we're actually saying is we want to build a platform where you're rewarded for doing that based on the kind of content that you enjoy. Like if we make that so far reaching, ultimately, it's going to be impossible for you to be like, I'm going to look at every single piece of content in the world. Won't be necessary.
You'll have what you're enjoying anyway. So you're watching the content you love and also benefit from it. So it's easy for me to prove what I watched when I already love and enjoy it.
I can answer some questions on it. I shared it with some friends, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think a big thing here is the lasting impact for creators. Like, how do you select creators to come into your ecosystem? I think the lasting value of this is something that's extremely important for this kind of ecosystem long term.
Really interesting point. Yeah. Ultimately, the intention is not to have to select creators. And for this to be plug and play technology. Okay. Anyone can be a content creator, right? If you're a great chef, if you're a gamer, if you're you have a particular craft that you're great at. You make whatever you make, clothing, you make digital clothing, if you're an artist, if whatever it might be, right? Everyone has something that they can create content about. If you spend the day completing crosswords, there's someone who's going to want to watch
put
it.
A camera there and just hit record,
right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, you know, depending on the kind of audience that you can nurture based on what you're creating content about, everyone here has the capacity to plug in and play with this technology and participate and earn through participation and also earn through creation. That's the plan. And so actually there won't be a requirement for, and as VP of Creator Strategy, my job will change considerably, because it won't be about making sure that we're engaging the right creators and we're asking them to engage in the narrative in a way that grows their own profile, but also like showcases what we're working on.
Got it.
Which is what I'm doing right now. It will be one of, you know, mass consumption, people wanting to participate in this because they understand and see the benefit of it. Right now, Simon, how am I engaging with creators? I'm never not on social media.
I see that. Yeah.
And I participate a lot, and I really look for and seek out creators who are extolling all of the virtues that I've spoken about during this podcast so far. Consistency, value add, entertaining, educating. Does not have to be based on vanity metrics. I am not particularly interested in your follower count.
Okay.
But I am interested in your reach, like your percentage, your conversion of how many impressions you're getting per post in comparison to how many followers you have.
Got it.
Because that says to me that your followers are actually finding your content valuable.
Yes.
But that's also kind of subjective, because you're currently feeding the algorithm the right way, which I'm not an algorithm fan, if you hadn't noticed. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, like, we all have to understand what goes into that. It's really interesting. I am personally going through a process of trying to better understand the algorithm and understand how I can increase my impressions and how I can, and I've found something which honestly is such a hack. Do you want to hear it?
Oh yes, please share.
So I have taken the time to follow accounts that have huge followings and get massive impressions on all of their posts, whose content I'm genuinely interested in.
Right.
And an example, and I've done that across quite a few different niches. And I'll give you one of those niches. It's English Premier League football. Like, I've been a fan of football in the UK for my entire life. And so I know a lot about it. I can talk very quickly on it. I understand like a lot of the context. I know the different teams. I know the different players. I know the coaches. I know the law. I know lots of what there is to know about it. So I've followed about 30 accounts that are talking about that regularly and getting huge impressions. And I've put my notifications on for those accounts. And I check. And as soon as those post, if I'm within the first 3 minutes of them posting, I'm reply guying, and I'm replying with something either contentious, contrary to what they're saying, perhaps a little bit insulting without being horrible, but like, you know, like,
and then you're going to get the responses, right?
Right. And I have been able to have, you know, like consistently, I was at like the 2,000 to 5,000 impressions per day. You know, I've had days in the last 3 weeks while I've been doing this, I've had days where I've had like 160,000 impressions. Wow. I'm up to, for 28 days, I'm up to 1.7 million impressions, which is up like 800% on where I was before on my 28. And it's all because I've been doing that. Now, I haven't changed the content I'm posting at all. Still posting my content. I'm still doing the things I'm doing. But it's the content
you're engaging with, but it's content that you're actually interested in anyway.
Correct.
Right.
And so what I need to do and refine is, how can I engage in the same way with content that I'm interested in and content that I am creating, how can I merge those things so that when people see the responses and the replies I'm giving and they check my profile, it syncs. It and they're like, oh, I'm going to give this person a follow.
And if it's completely different, like
Right?
your profile is like deep esoteric Web3 content and you're commenting on Premier League, they're like, wait, who's this guy?
Which is exactly what's happening now. So my impressions have gone through the roof, but my followers are absolutely static. And my follower count hasn't moved in 3 weeks, but my impressions have gone up 800%. So what I need to do is I need to figure out, and this is a really interesting thing, but I'm playing with it at the time. So when you ask me about how I'm picking these things, like I've got skin in the game, dude. I am actively creating content. I'm participating on platforms where people are creating content. I'm looking for trends. I'm seeing who's hacking it. I'm seeing who's understanding it. I'm seeing who can explain that to me in a way that I understand. And they're the kind of people that I'm engaging to work with right now.
I honestly feel like Web3 is a beacon of light, and what you've broken down here today is a real opportunity for content creators, because, you know, if we think about the mental health of a lot of artists having to think about how to game the algorithm, or my posts are not getting the reach they were 2 years ago, or it feels like you're just becoming static, or there's no momentum, the interest can fall off. And, you know, the really sad thing about that is I think a lot of really great ideas may go unseen because it's too difficult to hang with all of the tightening of the algorithm belt.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is exactly what's happening at the moment. And I'm the first to recommend to people that they are very, very careful with how much time they put into this, and that they try and find a balance. You know, and it's interesting because I spoke about Farouk earlier, and he's just built different, right? Like the guy's able to operate that way, and he still takes time to hang with his girlfriend. And
I see him going to the gym.
He's doing a lot of that this year. I'm trying to take a leaf out of that book. But these things, right? They're really, really important to your mental health, and it's essential that you do it. I think this is where, like, my advice, I can give advice to your question rather than answer it, which is that if you are really eager to build a great community and have your ideas shared, don't try and go the Logan Paul route. Try and go the Violetta route. Like, find your people, and your people doesn't have to be tens of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, which is the misconception, right? We think you need like hundreds of thousands of...
Right? Yeah. It could be 1,500 people, because believe me when I say it's difficult to speak to 1,500 people in a day.
Yeah.
But if you've got 1,500, if you've got 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people who are really engaged with what you are talking about, and you're consistently talking about it in an engaging way, you know, with them, where you know who they are, and you can have like a really great, exciting discourse back and forth, very familiar tone with one another, your follower count's going to go through the roof anyway, eventually, because you're being so authentic, and authenticity at the moment is what I'm seeing as like a really key trend. It's a very, very important part to creating content that has any kind of longevity and the ability to transcend.
There's an intimacy there, and it's like authenticity plus the intimacy, and being able to, like you said, speak to 1,500 people if you can. And if everyone's really engaged with your content and you have a decent enough following, that will kind of separate you from everyone else. Completely.
And so the vanity metrics, like, oh yeah, I just passed 16,000 followers, but I get like 11 likes for every tweet I send out. Well, there's a real disparity that, like, that's not working.
Yes.
And it's the wrong metric to look at. And I think brands as well, and partnerships, like, I think they're all starting to understand that follower count is not the direct route to success. It's eyeballs on what you're doing, you know, and then engagement with that content that's really, really starting to become very important.
And as you mentioned, Ben, it's early and perhaps not for crypto, or if you're talking about Bitcoin, for example, but this concept is quite early. And do you think this would be the right time for people to start exploring and experimenting, considering how early we actually are?
Yeah, I think so. When I came into the space, for example, selling an NFT required you to own a crypto wallet, populate that wallet with
Ethereum.
Cryptocurrency, whatever it might be, Ethereum as a example, then go to a platform that allowed the selling of NFTs, and then create a smart contract. And that smart contract is like the exchange, which says currently those tokens are here and you are paying this much money, and the exchange is that you are getting that, and the platform receives that percentage, and the royalty would be paid to the artist in that percentage. And that whole thing, like, you know, and we're talking only 3 years ago, you had to know how to code a smart contract. There was no codeless tech, and already, like, for the last year, there's platforms like Manifold. Manifold's such a great platform, where, you know, you don't have to know how to code that. You just tell it the answers to, you know, 20 questions, and then it creates the contract for you, and then you're able to deploy it, and away you go. And at the beginning of last year, that was still quite a complicated, nerve-wracking process. And now it's so easy. And like, having done it once or twice already, like, I could do it, and I could explain to someone how to do it without looking at their screen. I could just, like, on the phone, I could say, you're now looking at this page, just tick that and do that. And we're seeing that now across the board. Like, and also, like, with the invent of AI, and I'm super nervous about talking about that and talking about authentic, great content in the same sentence, because the reliance on ChatGPT for content creation is growing, and it's more and more obvious every day. I feel well enough informed to be able to tell you a tweet that has been created via ChatGPT and one that hasn't. But there are tools out there that are now, I think, making content with much greater production value in mind by people who have not been trained in production. And so for me, this feels like the perfect opportunity to get involved. And I think there are lots of resources. I've been a bit rubbish at giving great resources to you there. I'd say Rug Radio, I would say Decrypt, I would say Manifold. I would go check out OpenSea for all of the criticism that they've received because of their various stance on royalties and things. Still a platform that has millions of users per day and has a lot of resources that have been built to serve those users. And so you're going to go there and get, you know, correct information. And yeah, so I think right now is the perfect time to get involved. If you're interested in any of the things I've been talking about, but specifically in building a community that you are prepared to engage with and interact with regularly, as regularly as you want to. You don't have to say on a daily basis. As regularly as you commit to, then I think this is a perfect opportunity to get involved in that.
Yeah, and I think you feel it, don't you? You feel the shift. I remember years ago sitting in my car talking to a friend of mine who was really early to Web2. You know, back then it was all about apps and incubating app developers. And I remember those conversations were quite dense then. And I feel like we're slowly getting to the point where Web3 conversations are becoming lighter, as they did with Web2.
Yeah.
And you can feel the momentum gathering where you don't need to go so far into the weeds. Not to say I won't be or other people won't be, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. There's less friction. I agree. And I also think that and it's funny because people talk, people in the Web3 space, they can be very vocal about their like disdain at Web2 technology, but actually the last 15 years has been amazing when it comes to a broader amount of the population understanding what it means to develop UX and UI. Like, because so many more, beforehand, how many people owned a shop? Like, not many people owned a shop.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how many people own or run or contribute to a website? Like, and how many have over the last 15 years?
Yeah.
And how many of those people have looked at their website and gone, I don't like that bit, and done some research and changed that bit to make it a better experience for the people who are using that website.
Yeah.
So I think people's consciousness and cognizance of what it means to improve the user experience of anything that they're interacting with on a daily basis has grown exponentially. And so we've all got, I think we should all be very, very thankful to what has been, for sure.
Yeah.
And we should absolutely look to take that into what we've got coming down the pipe, because there's never been a better time to learn, understand, interact with, go and approach someone who is an absolute knowledge expert. Like right now in Web3, you have got pretty much access to every single builder and developer and creator who is kicking ass. And you can go and speak to those people and say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And I would say 8 times out of 10, they're going to say, yeah, okay, let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I think people are very generous with their time. And especially if you get into a community.
Yes.
Again, probably another conversation, but just to touch on it, if you get into a community, a Web3 community, you're going to be surrounded by very like-minded people.
Yes.
And it might be a Telegram group or X group or whatever. And you're surrounded by these individuals who may have been here for multiple years from the beginning, building, but you're going to be received with a lot of love, and people are open to sharing a lot of their knowledge. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of it's on you to go and research this and understand who the players are, right, and who really is inspiring and leading. So, get involved and ask questions.
Definitely. Last December, there was an event at Art Basel in Miami.
Yeah.
And Rug Radio hired a mansion. It was an amazing event.
I saw.
And actually, what they
sad
did,
I couldn't attend.
What they actually did is they went and found partners who wanted to sponsor that event. And then they invited, for my money, like the who's who of Web3 and its development to that house over a 4-day period. There were people there like Eric Calderon, Snowfro, the founder of Art Blocks. People there like Joe Lubin, the co-founder of Ethereum and Consensus and MetaMask, and and incredible artists like Coldy and All Seeing Seneca, and like really, really
heavyweights
who have had like seminal moments in this space's very short time. And you only had to own a Faces of Web3 NFT from the Rug Radio collection, which I think you could pick up at the time for maybe $40.
Yeah.
And you had to be able to get to Miami. I appreciate that. And we're all over the world, and you had to get a flight and a hotel and whatever. Like, it's not a cheap place. I get that. But if you were able to be there, you could go to that house and you could approach myself or Farouk or Loxley or Sims, Quinn at the time, Ev, like the whole team at Rug Radio. And one, we would engage with you and have a great time. But two, you could say, hey, I think that's, I don't know, Luca Netz over there, the current owner of Pudgy Penguins.
Pudgies. Yeah.
You think you could introduce him to me? And I'm telling you right now, every single person there would say, yeah, no problem, come with me. Like, and go over and say, Luca, just want to introduce you to this person. Very keen to meet you. A couple of minutes of your time. Appreciate it. Walk off and they could be connected. And I don't think there's ever been a time where that has been
no way
more accessible for people who are just coming into a space and the people who are absolutely, as you call them, heavyweights, building the tech that we're building on right now. And so I think for me, this is an absolutely perfect time to come into the space and to participate.
Yeah, especially, you know, as you say, it's like what, $40, and yeah, you have to get the flight, but it's a relatively low fee for the education and
completely
interaction and connections that you could have made in that setting.
You also got fed and watered while you were there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, what can you get for $40 these days? Yeah, exactly.
Right. but no, you're absolutely right. Like in terms of your education, if this is a space where you're very, very passionate about growing and learning and participating, and you want to network, like it's it's really cheap. Actually, it's great value for money.
Yeah, and again, I do recommend trying to find, or going back to what I was saying, finding a community that you can be part of.
Yeah, I agree.
Because what it does teach is, to become a member of a community, again, not to get in the weeds, but you're going to have to purchase an NFT, which means you're going to have to figure out how to get a wallet, right? So there's certain things you will learn along the way and that you will need. And it's a lot easier now. But by putting yourself out there and trying to educate yourself, you will be doing a lot of this automatically. And it's an education in of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of it that way. And you're completely right. And this is why I say, and why we spoke about earlier, like do your research at the beginning. Just observe. Yeah. Because there are lots of communities out there, and there are lots of groups of people who have all got different interests and different motivations, and just take the time to think about what your interest and motivation is, and then try and find the community where that aligns.
Agreed.
And there are people out there who will help you with that. There are, like on crypto Twitter, there are people out there who, one, they're either asking the same question themselves, and but there are people who have been participating and are very, very prolific creators who will take the time to say, like, answer 3 questions for me, and I reckon I could give you 5 examples of a great community for you to join.
Yeah. Genuine as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ben, maybe it's a bit early to answer. A forward-looking perspective on Rug and the Stan and everything you're doing over there. What's the vision of how this can really shape the content landscape over the next 5 years or so? And what do you really want to achieve? Yeah,
well, look, I'll answer the Rug bit very, very quickly, because it's not really my place to say for the next 5 years. I'm in the journey right now. But what I can tell you is that Rug Radio, Decrypt, and the parent company Dastan are hell-bent on disrupting the media landscape. And not disrupting because they like causing chaos, as much as we all do love a bit of chaos. Disrupting because it is in our opinion, broken system that stands to reward all participants fairly and without having to dig the whole thing up and start again. And I know that that's what we're hell-bent on creating at Rug Radio. Personally, what do I think the landscape looks like in the next 5 to 10 years, and what do I see platforms doing? I think it's actually more of the same. Like, I think disruption is what Web3 has the capability to do. And the reason I use the word disruption is because at the moment, in a centralized fashion, there are like, and I can't give you a number, but I'm just going to guess, there are probably like 30 to 50 like behemoth businesses, companies that kind of call the shots across the whole landscape. And I think that Web3 and the realization that you only need 1,000 true fans, and you can you can ramp that up a little bit, and you can say like 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 fans, whatever. I think as people come to realize that is what is required, I think more and more people will be turned off from the giants of tech calling the shots on everything, and much more likely to follow the tech and the platforms and the creators and the individuals who really engage them. Now, disruption always then leads to a great reaction, right?
Yes.
And so all is not lost for the likes of Facebook and Meta, and its competitors at all. And they have, I think, an ability at this stage to pivot and to
adopt.
Yeah, to adopt the technology, to look at the people who in the last 5 years have really started to build exciting things, and to bring them in a way that says, like, we are happy to relinquish control, but we want to continue to be a great place where people come and do this stuff. And their business model changes. Like, Google's just spent the last 20 years developing cross-platform sign-on and payment solution, and and Apple, I know have the App Store and the ability to listen to your music and your television and all of the devices, your watches, your head. Like, there's absolutely no need for all of that, and there's also not likely at all for all of that to kind of like disintegrate. But what I do think big tech companies need to do is be cognizant of the shift in the relationship between brand, business, and consumer. And I think the next 5 to 10 years we see that shift pick up pace. And then we start to see the reaction from the big brands. And I'm actually very excited to see what that shift looks like, and how many of these amazing companies that are being built actually get absorbed and the technology gets rolled out across those platforms. I can see that coming down the road. The
acquisitions potentially.
It's going to happen, and I don't think it will be. I don't think it will be acquisition to silence. You used to see the big guy buy the small guy and then like
put
close
you in
him
a
down.
corner. Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I think it's more like acquisition because there's a recognized change that they need to catch up with.
Yeah, and just it's all positive in terms of interaction with
consumer experience. Is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. I think so too. And I think with that comes a lot of other cool things as well. Like, you can start to belong to communities and use platforms. Going back to the nude photography bit that I was talking about beforehand, you can start to plug into platforms that do honor and lean into your own sensibilities. Like, if you don't want to see particular things, you can go to communities and places and platforms, and that is honored. You don't have to be exposed to it. But if you also, you want to be a bit more rock and roll, whatever, you can go there, and that is also
more of a personalized
open to
consumer experience.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think even talking about followers and your platform, and even that being reduced down to size. And you see it now, like groups breaking off into smaller groups, and maybe there's 50 to 100 people connecting on a daily basis, and there's no pressure to post anything or have this engagement, but you're in these smaller chat groups on a daily basis having really interesting conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, Ben, I always ask a similar question at the end of all of my episodes, and maybe you've seen the pattern here, and I adapt it a little bit depending on who I'm talking to.
Sure.
And the question is, what do you think it takes to be a successful leader in this space?
I love this question. And it's actually a really simple answer, in my opinion. the most successful leaders that I see in this space and throughout history and the world and whatever sector, whatever place, it's the ability to communicate really, really clearly, and the ability to articulate what it is you want to achieve and articulate it in a way that no matter who you speak to, they understand it and they live and breathe it with you. And for me, like, obviously you have to have skills as a leader to, you know, like, that goes without saying, but to take your skills and apply them in a way that allows you to build an amazing community or create an incredible business or develop a world life-changing product, I think it's about how you take the vision, you take the idea, and you communicate it to the people who are going to help you build that. And if you are really, really great at that, if you can bring people with you in a way that makes them excited to get out of bed every day and in it for the thrill of getting to the result, no matter how exciting or boring the subject matter, if the mission is clearly communicated and excites the people who are there to deliver it, you will run through walls. And so, yeah, for me, communication is absolutely key and critical, and I try every day to be a better communicator and to pick through the interactions that I've had with the people I work with or the people that I engage with or whatever, family, friends, to assess whether I clearly communicated what I was trying to get across and whether I listened to them and allowed them to do the same. Because for me, it's the most important thing in the world. Yeah.
Especially in an evolving space, I think.
Yeah. In a space where what was really important last week is now, you know, yesterday's news and literally no longer the narrative. People are having to pivot and change their direction so quickly in this space, not because they are unable to stick to one thing. It's actually because the whole narrative of the space and the expectation of the community and the what the tech enables is changing so quickly.
Which is extremely positive for trying to change.
Oh yeah, and annoying.
yeah, right.
I'd like to press pause sometimes.
It's like, you know, I looked at it like getting into a community. It's like you can pay to go to college or university to get an education, or find a community you vibe with, buy an NFT, and I think you'll end up learning more in a month than you would in a year or a 3-year course, and meeting some great people along the way.
100%. This space and what's happening at the moment is best consumed through lived experience. Yeah,
I agree. Well, Ben, I really appreciate you taking the time to break this has been great down, and I think it's really important, and the timing is pretty crucial for people to really start understanding what this all means for creators, artists, for brands, and how to enter the space and what's important, and how, as you say, creators can transcend into the mainstream. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to break down your answers. As you said, communication is really important.
It is.
I think you've articulated these complex topics in a way that I think is understandable without going too under the hood. So for those listening, come and join us on X.
Come say hello. I'm very, very happy to point you in the right direction of any of it.
Ben, where can people find you?
So yeah, X is where I hang out more than anywhere else. And I'm at Hello Ben White, all one word. So follow along and drop a DM or whatever, and let me know if you've got any questions or you need pointing in the right direction. I'm very happy to help. But, you know, I really appreciate you inviting me on, Simon. It's been great to talk about it. It's great to get the grey matter thinking about the right way to talk about these things, because truly, like, you can get really in the weeds and forget what it means to have to tell people this in a manner that doesn't blow their mind. So it's good practice.
Yeah. So no, thank you, and thanks again, Ben, for the breakdown. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Thank you, Ben. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Object, Subject, Form. Your engagement helps build a community of like-minded creatives as we navigate the complexities of our respective creative journeys together. If these stories and topics inspire you throughout the series, I encourage you to subscribe, share, and follow me through the links provided in the episode description.